History isn't just a collection of dry facts and dates, it's a shadowy labyrinth of secrets, half-truths, and unanswered questions. Behind every official story, there's often another version waiting to be uncovered, one that challenges what we think we know. From vanished civilizations to suspicious deaths, from hidden agendas to forged documents, the past is teeming with mysteries that refuse to stay buried. And sometimes the wildest theories, the ones dismissed as pure fantasy, turn out to hold a sliver of truth if you're willing to dig deep enough. What if the history books got it wrong? What if some of the most pivotal moments we've been taught were actually carefully crafted illusions? The unsettling truth is that power, deception, and conspiracy have shaped our world far more than we might realize. Even today, new evidence emerges that forces us to rethink long-accepted narratives. Hidden messages in ancient texts, strange coincidences that defy explanation, whistleblowers whose testimonies vanish overnight, all of it hints at a reality far stranger than we've been led to believe. So today, we're peeling back the layers of time to examine 30 historical conspiracies that might just be true. These aren't just baseless rumors or internet fantasies. They're puzzles with real evidence, inconsistencies that historians still wrestle with, and whispers from the past that refuse to fade. Whether it's a royal family's darkest secret, a war started under false pretenses, or an entire civilization erased from memory, these stories will make you question everything. Because sometimes the most unbelievable tales are the ones that hold the key to the truth. Are you ready to step into the shadows and see what's really lurking in the pages of history? The story of Rome's lost legion is one of history's most tantalizing mysteries, an entire army vanishing into thin air, only to reappear centuries later on the other side of the world. It all began in the year 53 BCE, when Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of Rome's wealthiest and most powerful men, led a disastrous campaign against the Parthian Empire. At the Battle of Carrhae, his forces were slaughtered and Crassus himself was killed, or so the official record claims, but whispers persisted that not all of his soldiers perished. Some say thousands were taken captive and marched east into the unknown. Decades later, an odd detail surfaces in Chinese records from the Han Dynasty. Around 36 BCE, imperial forces clashed with a group of mercenaries near the Taklamakan Desert, seasoned fighters with unusual tactics who reportedly had hair the color of gold and fought in formations eerily similar to Roman testudo tactics. Even stranger, remnants of what appear to be Roman-style fortifications were discovered in the remote Chinese village of Liqian, where some locals still have light-colored hair and features strikingly different from their neighbors. Archaeologists unearthed artifacts, pieces of armor, weapons, and even coins that seem distinctly Roman in design. Could these have been the remnants of Crassus' lost legion? Skeptics argue that the distance was too vast, the evidence too thin. But proponents point to Rome's extensive trade networks, the presence of other Roman artifacts along the Silk Road, and genetic studies showing European lineage in some Lycian villages. The debate still rages, a puzzle wrapped in fragments of pottery and strands of blonde hair. If true, it would mean a band of Roman soldiers not only survived their defeat, but carved out a new life thousands of miles from home, leaving behind clues just waiting to be pieced together. What began as a military disaster might have ended as one of history's most astonishing cross-cultural encounters, lost but not forgotten. William Shakespeare is celebrated as the greatest playwright in history, the mastermind behind timeless works like Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet. But what if the man from Stratford-upon-Avon didn't write a single word of them? For centuries, scholars and skeptics have pointed to glaring inconsistencies in Shakespeare's biography that make his authorship seem almost impossible. The son of an illiterate glovemaker, he left behind no personal letters, manuscripts, or evidence of formal education. Yet his plays display an intimate knowledge of law, astronomy, foreign courts, and classical literature that would have been inaccessible to someone of his modest background. How could a man with no recorded trips outside England craft such vivid depictions of Venice, Denmark, and Verona? Enter the Earl of Oxford theory. Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, was a nobleman, poet, and patron of the arts who traveled extensively through Italy, the very setting Shakespeare brought to life. His writing style mirrors the bard's, and his personal tragedies, like the forced annulment of his marriage, eerily parallel themes in plays like Othello. Even more compelling, de Vere died in 1604, the same year Shakespeare's name abruptly stopped appearing on new plays. Supporters argue he hid his identity because nobility writing for public theatre was scandalous at the time. Some even claim to have found coded references to de Vere in the text, like the cryptic dedication in Shakespeare's sonnets to a mysterious, ever-living poet, a phrase that could cleverly hint at Vere, but mainstream scholars dismiss these claims as fantasy. They point to contemporary evidence like praise from fellow writers who knew Shakespeare personally and argue that genius isn't bound by class. The coded messages, coincidence or creative overreach? The debate rages on, fueled by passionate amateurs and tenured academics alike. Whether you believe the plays sprang from a humble glover's son or an aristocratic ghostwriter, one thing's certain: the mystery only deepens the legend. And if the real author was hiding in plain sight all along, it would be the greatest literary deception in history, a plot twist even Shakespeare couldn't have written better. The disappearance of the princes in the Tower is one of English history's darkest enigmas, a tale of royal ambition, betrayal, and two young boys who vanished without a trace. It begins in the spring of 1483, when 12-year-old King Edward V and his 9-year-old brother Richard were sent to the Tower of London for their protection by their uncle, the future Richard III. Officially, they were awaiting Edward's coronation, but within months the boys were never seen again, and Richard seized the crown for himself. Within 2 years, rumors swirled that he'd ordered their murders to secure his grip on power. The historical record is a battleground of contradictions. Tudor chroniclers, writing after Richard's death, painted him as a ruthless villain. Shakespeare immortalized this version in his play Richard III, depicting him as a hunchback tyrant. But contemporary accounts are eerily silent. No arrests, no investigations, no bodies. Then, in 1674, workers renovating the tower made a grisly discovery: a wooden chest buried beneath a staircase containing the skeletons of 2 children. Were these the lost princes? Forensic analysis in the 1930s suggested the bones matched their ages, but the remains mysteriously vanished before modern DNA testing could confirm it. Revisionist historians argue Richard's guilt isn't so clear-cut. His reign saw unprecedented reforms for the poor, and he had no clear motive. The boys were already declared illegitimate by Parliament, removing their claim. Others point to Henry VII, who defeated Richard at Bosworth Field and had every reason to erase his predecessor's legacy. Even the famous Tudor portraits of Richard show signs of later alteration. Was his monstrous reputation fabricated? Modern investigations keep the mystery alive. In 2012, archaeologists used ground-penetrating radar to search for more remains, while documents uncovered in the Vatican archives hint at a possible cover-up. One letter from an Italian merchant mentions the boys being secretly sent abroad alive. If true, it would rewrite one of history's most infamous crimes. Until new evidence emerges, the fate of the princes remains suspended between fact and folklore. A ghost story written in bones and ink. Buried beneath the waters of the Mediterranean for over 2,000 years, the Antikythera Mechanism is a relic so advanced it shouldn't exist. Discovered in 1901 by sponge divers off the coast of a tiny Greek island, this corroded bronze device about the size of a shoebox was initially dismissed as just another shipwreck artifact. But when researchers cleaned away the centuries of encrusted debris, they uncovered something astonishing: a complex system of interlocking gears, precision-cut dials, and inscriptions detailing planetary movements. Dated to between 150 and 100 BCE, this wasn't just a tool, it was an ancient Greek computer capable of predicting eclipses, tracking the cycles of the Olympic Games, and even modeling the irregular orbit of the moon with accuracy that wouldn't be matched for another millennium. How did a civilization without industrial machinery craft such a sophisticated device? Mainstream historians suggest it might have been the work of geniuses like Archimedes or his followers, but the mechanism's complexity defies easy explanation. Fragments of similar devices have never been found, leaving this artifact as a lone technological marvel in a world we thought relied on simple sundials. Some theorists propose even wilder ideas. Could this knowledge have come from a lost civilization, or was it inspired by contact with advanced cultures now erased from history? The unsettling truth is that the Antikythera mechanism forces us to reconsider just how much ancient societies knew and how much of their brilliance was lost to time. Meanwhile, half a world away in Mesopotamia, another artifact challenges our assumptions about the past: the Baghdad Battery. Discovered in 1936 near the ruins of the Parthian capital, these unassuming clay jars, each about 5 inches tall, contained a rolled copper cylinder, an iron rod, and traces of an acidic substance like vinegar or wine. When reconstructed, they produced a small electric charge, leading some researchers to argue these could have been primitive galvanic cells, predating modern batteries by nearly 2,000 years. Skeptics counter that the jars might have simply been used for storage or religious rituals, but experiments show they're capable of generating enough voltage to electroplate objects with gold, a technique known to have been used in the region around the same period. If these were indeed batteries, the implications are staggering. Ancient people may have harnessed electricity long before Galvani or Volta, perhaps using it for medical treatments, metalworking, or even temple mysticism. But like the Antikythera mechanism, the Baghdad Battery exists in isolation: no wires, no appliances, no clear context to explain its purpose. Were these devices the work of forgotten innovators or just accidental curiosities? Either way, they stand as haunting reminders that history's timeline might be missing crucial chapters. Together, these artifacts whisper the same tantalizing question: how much of our ancestors' knowledge was lost or deliberately buried? The deeper we dig, the more it seems the ancient world was far more advanced and far more mysterious than we ever imagined. Among the world's most enduring puzzles, the Voynich Manuscript stands alone, a book that refuses to reveal its secrets. Dating back to the early 15th century, this handwritten codex is filled with 240 pages of baffling botanical illustrations, celestial charts, and nude figures bathing in eerily interconnected tubes of green liquid. But the real enigma lies in its text, an undecipherable script flowing in neat rows like a language yet unidentified, with characters unlike any known alphabet. For centuries, cryptographers, linguists, and even wartime codebreakers have tried, and failed, to crack its meaning. Theories about its origins range from the scholarly to the surreal. Some argue it's an elaborate Renaissance hoax crafted to deceive wealthy collectors with a book of nonsense. Others propose it's a lost language, perhaps a proto-Romance tongue or a deliberately obscured alchemical cipher. More fringe ideas suggest extraterrestrial influence or a glimpse into a parallel dimension fueled by the manuscript's otherworldly plants, which resemble no known species on Earth. Even the book's provenance is murky. It resurfaces in the court of Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II in the late 16th century, who allegedly purchased it for 600 gold ducats, believing it to be the work of the 13th century philosopher Roger Bacon. But carbon dating places its vellum pages firmly in the early 1400s, leaving its creator and purpose unknown. Modern technology has only deepened the mystery. In 2014, researchers applied statistical analysis to the text, revealing patterns consistent with a genuine language, not random gibberish. Then, in 2018, a team of AI researchers trained an algorithm to decode the manuscript structure. The results were startling. The text appeared to be written in encoded Hebrew, with the words rearranged systematically. But when linguists attempted to translate it, the outcome was disjointed phrases about farming and medicine, but no coherent narrative. Skeptics dismissed the findings as algorithmic pareidolia, the machine equivalent of seeing shapes in clouds. Perhaps the most haunting clue lies in the manuscript's botanical section. Some plants bear faint similarities to species from the Americas, a detail impossible for a European manuscript predating Columbus's voyage. Unless, of course, the author had access to knowledge or travel routes history has forgotten. No single theory fully explains the Voynich Manuscript. It exists as a riddle wrapped in vellum, challenging our assumptions about medieval knowledge and the limits of human ingenuity. Until someone breaks its code definitively, it remains a ghost of the past whispering secrets we can't yet hear. In the scorching summer of 1518, the streets of Strasbourg became the stage for one of history's strangest and most terrifying spectacles. It started with a single woman, a lone dancer, twisting and jerking in the town square, her movements frantic, her body seemingly beyond her control. Within days, dozens joined her. Then hundreds. They danced without rest, their feet bleeding, their faces contorted in exhaustion, as if gripped by some invisible force. By the time the plague subsided weeks later, at least 50 people had danced themselves to death. What could have driven an entire community to such a grotesque frenzy? The leading theory points to mass psychogenic illness, a form of collective hysteria where psychological distress manifests physically. Strasbourg at the time was a tinderbox of suffering. Famine, disease, and crushing poverty had left the population desperate. Some historians suggest the dancing was a subconscious release, a communal breakdown under extreme stress. But others argue this explanation is too neat. Eyewitness accounts describe the dancers as terrified, pleading for help even as their limbs refused to obey. Then there's the ergot poisoning theory. This mold, which grows on damp rye, produces chemicals similar to LSD. Ingesting contaminated bread could trigger hallucinations, spasms, and a sensation of burning limbs, symptoms eerily similar to those reported in Strasbourg. The region's poor, who relied heavily on rye, would have been particularly vulnerable. Yet skeptics note that ergotism typically causes gangrene and convulsions, not coordinated, prolonged dancing. The mystery deepens when we examine similar outbreaks throughout history. Centuries earlier in the Rhineland, entire congregations were struck by dancing mania, leaping and shouting during church services. In Madagascar in the 1960s, a wave of uncontrollable laughter swept through schools, lasting months. These episodes share uncanny parallels: social tension, rapid spread, and abrupt endings. Some researchers propose they're a form of cultural coping mechanism, a physical expression of suppressed trauma. Modern science still struggles to explain these phenomena. In 2012, a Leroy, New York high school became the epicenter of another outbreak. Teenagers developed uncontrollable tics and twitches, sparking fears of environmental toxins. Investigations found no physical cause, pointing instead to conversion disorder, where stress manifests as neurological symptoms. The line between mind and body blurs in these cases, leaving us to wonder, could something in our collective psychology make us susceptible to invisible epidemics? The dancing plague of 1518 remains an open wound in medical history. Whether fueled by poison, panic, or something even stranger, it forces us to confront the fragility of human control and the disturbing power of the unseen forces that can overtake us. Perhaps the most unsettling question isn't what caused the dancing, but whether, under the right conditions, it could happen again. The Amber Room was once called the eighth wonder of the world, a chamber lined with 6 tons of glittering amber, gold leaf, and intricate mosaics worth over $500 million today. Crafted in Prussia in the early 18th century, it was gifted to Tsar Peter the Great as a diplomatic peace offering, then expanded into a dazzling 36-square-meter masterpiece in Catherine Palace. But in 1941, as Nazi forces advanced into the Soviet Union, the room vanished without a trace. The official story is simple enough. German troops dismantled the amber panels, packed them into crates, and shipped them to Königsberg Castle for display. But when the city fell in 1945, the treasure was gone. Witnesses claim to have seen the crates loaded onto a ship, the Wilhelm Gustloff, which was later torpedoed and sank in the Baltic Sea. Divers have searched the wreckage for decades, finding nothing, yet fragments of the mystery keep resurfacing. In 1997, a single original mosaic from the room turned up in Germany, seized from the son of a Nazi soldier. Then, in 2016, Polish researchers claimed to have located an armored train buried near the Czech border, a train supposedly filled with looted gold, art, and possibly pieces of the Amber Room. Ground-penetrating radar revealed an anomaly matching the dimensions of a railway car, but excavations yielded only wartime debris. Even stranger are the claims of retired Soviet officers who insist Stalin secretly recovered the room years ago and hid it in a restricted repository. Declassified KGB files mention a covert operation to secure cultural artifacts in the late 1940s, but no concrete evidence links it to the amber panels. Meanwhile, German treasure hunters still comb abandoned bunkers and salt mines, chasing rumors of hidden Nazi storerooms. The most tantalizing clue emerged in 2020 when researchers discovered a previously unknown diary from a German soldier describing how the crates were hidden in a network of caves near Königsberg. The diary's pages crumbled upon handling, but infrared scans revealed coordinates matching a region now part of Russia. Expeditions to the site have been blocked by government restrictions, fueling speculation that someone knows more than they're admitting. Whether lost at sea, buried in a forgotten bunker, or locked away in some secret archive, the Amber Room's fate remains one of history's greatest unsolved heists. Each new discovery only deepens the intrigue, proving that some treasures refuse to stay hidden even when the world forgets where to look. In the summer of 1845, Sir John Franklin set sail with 2 ships, the Erebus and Terror, on a mission to chart the elusive Northwest Passage. Equipped with cutting-edge technology and enough provisions to last years, the expedition seemed invincible. Yet by 1848, both ships and all 129 men had vanished into the Arctic ice. For decades, the British Admiralty insisted the crew perished honorably, victims of scurvy, lead poisoning from poorly sealed cans, or the merciless cold. But Inuit hunters told a different story, one so shocking that Victorian England refused to believe it. Tales of starved sailors resorting to cannibalism, with bones cracked open to extract the marrow. For over a century, these accounts were dismissed as savage rumors until modern science forced a reckoning. In the 1980s, anthropologists exhumed 3 bodies preserved in the permafrost on Beechey Island. Autopsies revealed lethal levels of lead, likely from the expedition's tinned food, but also signs of tuberculosis and pneumonia. Then, in 1992, researchers studying bones from King William Island found unmistakable proof: knife marks consistent with systematic butchering, skull fractures suggesting brains were removed, and limbs severed with precision. The evidence aligned eerily with Inuit testimonies describing white men eating each other's flesh near starvation camps, but the mystery doesn't end there. Recent climate studies reveal another layer to the tragedy. Ice core samples show 1846 to 1848 had some of the coldest summers in centuries, trapping Franklin's ships in impenetrable pack ice. Tree ring data suggests this wasn't just bad luck, it was part of a broader climatic shift. possibly linked to volcanic activity halfway across the world. The expedition didn't just fail, it was doomed by forces its crew couldn't have foreseen. The Admiralty's resistance to the cannibalism claims speaks to a darker truth. Accepting Inuit testimony would have shattered the myth of British superiority, exposing the Empire's finest as desperate, fractured men. Even today, some historians argue the cuts could have been from post-mortem mutilation, a cultural taboo distorting the evidence. Yet Inuit oral histories passed down with meticulous detail describe specific sites where forensic teams later found human remains. Their accuracy is undeniable. Franklin's story is more than a grim footnote. It's a collision of arrogance and survival, of how official narratives silence inconvenient truths. The Arctic didn't just take those men's lives, it swallowed their legacy, leaving behind bones and whispers. And in the end, the ice might have been kinder than the history books. Abraham Lincoln's assassination wasn't just the act of a lone gunman. It was the spark that ignited a firestorm of suspicion, cover-ups, and unanswered questions that linger to this day. While John Wilkes Booth is etched into history as the face of the conspiracy, the deeper threads of the plot suggest a web far more tangled than textbooks let on. Behind the curtains of Ford's Theater, whispers of Confederate operatives, shadowy financiers, and even high-ranking officials pulling strings paint a picture of a conspiracy that might have reached the highest levels of power. Start with Booth himself, an actor, yes, but also a fervent Confederate sympathizer with connections that ran deep. In the days leading up to April 14, 1865, he met repeatedly with a circle of Southern loyalists, including Dr. Samuel Mudd, who set Booth's fractured leg after the assassination, and Mary Surratt, whose boarding house served as a meeting place for the plotters. But the most damning clue lies in Booth's diary, recovered after his death. 18 crucial pages had been torn out, pages that might have named co-conspirators or revealed the true scope of the plot. Who removed them? The diary was in the possession of Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, a man whose actions in the aftermath raise haunting questions. Stanton's behavior was nothing short of bizarre. He ordered the telegraph lines shut down immediately after the shooting, delaying news of Lincoln's death for hours. He personally controlled all interrogations of suspects, some of whom died under mysterious circumstances before they could testify. Most chillingly, he replaced Lincoln's bodyguard, John Parker, with an inexperienced officer the night of the murder, a move that left the president defenseless. Was Stanton, a known political rival of Lincoln, merely incompetent, or was there something more sinister at play? Some historians point to his ties to radical factions within the Republican Party, who opposed Lincoln's lenient plans for Southern Reconstruction. Then there's the Catholic Church angle, a theory so explosive it's been buried for generations. Booth was raised Episcopalian but attended a Catholic school in his youth, and rumors swirled that he'd converted secretly. More intriguingly, several of the conspirators, including Surratt, had ties to the Knights of the Golden Circle, a pro-Confederate secret society rumored to have infiltrated the church. After the assassination, key figures fled to Catholic strongholds like Montreal, where Confederate funds were allegedly laundered through church networks. Even the weapon Booth used, a Philadelphia Derringer, was traced to a gunsmith with known Confederate and Catholic connections. The trial that followed only deepened the intrigue. Of the 8 conspirators convicted, 4 were hanged, including Mary Surratt, the first woman executed by the U.S. government, but testimony was rushed, evidence was withheld, and the military tribunal prohibited defense witnesses from being called. Were these men and women scapegoats sacrificed to hide a larger conspiracy? The speed with which the case was closed, just 2 months after Lincoln's death, suggests a cover-up, not justice. Modern researchers continue to chip away at the official narrative. In 2010, descendants of Booth petitioned to exhume his body, suspecting the man buried in his grave might be an imposter, a theory fueled by persistent claims that Booth escaped and lived under an alias. Meanwhile, newly uncovered letters from Confederate leaders hint at prior knowledge of the assassination plot, with one general writing cryptically of a decapitation strike weeks before Lincoln's murder. The truth may never be fully known, but one thing is clear: Lincoln's assassination wasn't just a crime, it was a coup, a seismic event that reshaped America's future. And the gaps in the story, the missing pages, the silenced witnesses, they're not just historical footnotes. They're the echoes of a conspiracy that succeeded far beyond Booth's wildest dreams. The legend of the Philadelphia experiment reads like science fiction ripped from the pages of a pulp novel. A warship vanishing into thin air, sailors fused into bulkheads, and a military secret so terrifying it was buried for decades. It all began in the summer of 1943, off the coast of the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, where the USS Eldridge, a Cannon-class destroyer escort, was allegedly outfitted with experimental technology designed to render it invisible to radar. But according to scattered witness accounts, something went catastrophically wrong. Instead of merely cloaking the ship, the electromagnetic field generated by the so-called Einstein Unified Field Theory experiment caused the Eldridge to briefly teleport to Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away, before reappearing in Philadelphia moments later with horrifying consequences. Crew members supposedly suffered gruesome injuries, some burned beyond recognition, others embedded within the ship's metal structure as if their molecules had fused with the steel. Survivors were said to have suffered severe mental trauma, with a few even disappearing permanently after phasing in and out of visibility for days. The Navy officially denied the incident ever occurred, dismissing it as a hoax fueled by misinterpreted radar jamming tests. But the story gained traction in the 1950s when Morris K. Jessup, an astronomer investigating antigravity, received letters from a mysterious Carlos Allende, who claimed to be a witness aboard a nearby merchant ship. Allende described seeing the Eldridge flicker like a mirage before vanishing entirely, a detail eerily echoed by other supposed witnesses. Decades later, the mythos expanded with the emergence of the Montauk Project, an alleged follow-up experiment rumored to have taken place at Camp Hero, a declassified Air Force base on Long Island. According to conspiracy theorists, the government resumed research into time manipulation and psychic warfare in the 1970s, using knowledge gleaned from the Philadelphia experiment. Whistleblowers like Preston Nichols and Al Bielek claimed to have worked on the project, describing nightmarish experiments involving mind control, teleportation, and even contact with extraterrestrial entities. The most outlandish accounts suggest Montauk scientists opened a portal to the year 1943, directly linking the two experiments in a paradoxical loop. Skeptics argue both stories are textbook cases of urban legend creep, layers of half-truths and fabricated testimonies building on wartime secrecy and Cold War paranoia. Declassified documents confirm the Navy was indeed researching degaussing techniques to protect ships from magnetic mines, but nothing resembling teleportation. As for Montauk, the Air Force openly used Camp Hero for radar testing, leaving behind abandoned equipment that likely fueled speculation. Yet persistent questions remain. Why were so many of the alleged Philadelphia experiment witnesses silenced or met with untimely deaths? Why does the government still withhold certain files on Camp Hero to this day? Whether these experiments were real or merely the fever dreams of a paranoid era, they've become cultural touchstones, cautionary tales about the dangers of unchecked military ambition. The line between myth and history blurs whenever power operates in the shadows, leaving us to wonder how much of the truth is still hidden beneath layers of classification and disinformation. And if even a fraction of these claims are real, what other experiments might still be unfolding behind closed doors? On the freezing slopes of Russia's Ural Mountains in February 1959, a seasoned group of hikers met a fate so bizarre it defies logic to this day. The Dyatlov Pass incident, named for their leader Igor Dyatlov, began as a routine trek through the snowy wilderness but ended in a nightmare of unexplained terror. When search teams finally located the skiers' abandoned tent weeks later, they found it ripped open from the inside as if the group had fled in blind panic. Footprints led away into the snow, some barefoot, others clad only in socks. Then the bodies started turning up scattered across the mountainside, some with crushed ribs, one missing a tongue, others with skull fractures so severe they resembled car crash victims. The official Soviet investigation blamed an unknown compelling force, then quietly closed the case, but the evidence suggests something far more sinister may have occurred. One of the most chilling details, the hikers' injuries weren't consistent with an avalanche, the initial cover story. Their tent was still standing, undisturbed by snow. Some victims had internal trauma like the kind caused by a shockwave, but no external wounds. Others showed signs of extreme radiation on their clothing. Then there were the reports of strange orange spheres spotted in the sky that night, documented in the diaries of nearby travelers. This has fueled theories of secret military testing, specifically experiments with infrasound weapons which can induce panic and organ damage at frequencies below human hearing. The area was off-limits to civilians at the time, and Soviet archives later revealed missile tests were indeed conducted nearby, but the anomalies don't stop there. Forensic analysis showed some of the hikers' clothing contained traces of radioactive isotopes, while others had skin bizarrely tanned a deep brown, as if exposed to intense heat. Then came the claims of a hidden KGB file leaked in the 1990s referencing unauthorized witnesses and protocol violations near Dyatlov Pass that winter. One former officer even hinted the group might have stumbled upon a crashed experimental aircraft, a theory bolstered by reports of metal debris found near the site. The most haunting theory of all, the Mansi indigenous people native to the region have long spoken of vengeful mountain spirits in those peaks. Could centuries of folklore hold a kernel of truth, some natural phenomenon we still don't understand? Modern researchers have proposed everything from freak katabatic winds to plasma discharges during solar storms, but no single explanation fits all the evidence. The truth remains locked in the frozen ground of the Urals, guarded by time and Cold War secrecy. One thing is certain, whatever happened that night, it was violent, inexplicable, and almost certainly covered up. The Dyatlov Pass incident isn't just a mystery, it's a warning about what happens when nature, technology, and human curiosity collide in the shadows. And the deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes. Some secrets are buried for a reason. On December 5, 1945, just after 2 in the afternoon, 5 U.S. Navy Avenger bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale on a routine training mission Flight 19. The weather was clear, the pilots experienced the flight path straightforward. But somewhere over the Atlantic, something went terribly wrong. Radio transcripts from that day capture the growing panic as the squadron's leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, reported his compasses malfunctioning. "Both my compasses are out," he radioed, voice crackling with static. "We seem to be off course. We can't be sure of any direction. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should." Other pilots chimed in, their voices tense with confusion. One reported seeing white water below, as if the sea itself had transformed. Then, as mysteriously as the trouble began, all contact was lost. A massive search operation scoured the area, but not a single piece of wreckage was ever found, not even an oil slick. To this day, Flight 19 remains the Bermuda Triangle's most infamous vanishing act. The official Navy report pinned the disaster on pilot error, blaming Taylor for leading his men astray after becoming disoriented, but the details don't add up. These weren't rookies, they'd flown this route countless times, and Taylor, despite what the Navy claimed, was a seasoned aviator with over 2,500 flight hours. Even stranger, the rescue plane sent to find them, a massive PBM Mariner also disappeared without a trace, exploding in midair according to a passing merchant ship that saw the fireball. This is where the conspiracies take flight. Some point to anomalous magnetic fields in the region disrupting instruments, a phenomenon documented in other parts of the triangle. Others suggest more sinister forces at work. Declassified documents reveal the military was testing advanced navigation systems in the area at the time, including early radar jamming technology. Could Flight 19 have stumbled into a classified experiment gone wrong? Witnesses on the ground reported odd atmospheric disturbances that afternoon, with one naval officer describing a sky that looked like it was split in two. Then there's the eerie silence surrounding the incident. Families of the crew were pressured to drop inquiries, and key pages of the investigation remain redacted to this day. Even the Navy's own map of the flight's last known coordinates was later found to be altered, shifting the location by nearly 60 miles. Why go to such lengths unless there was something to hide? Skeptics argue that the Bermuda Triangle's reputation is just a mix of sensationalism and statistical coincidence. But Flight 19 is different. 14 men vanished without leaving so much as a seat cushion behind. Their disappearance sparked the first widespread whispers of the Triangle's curse, turning a patch of ocean into a global obsession. Whatever happened that December afternoon, whether it was a freak accident, a military secret, or something beyond our understanding, one thing's certain: the sea keeps its secrets well. And sometimes they never surface at all. On the night of August 15, 1977, Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope picked up something extraordinary, a signal so powerful, so unlike anything in the natural universe, that astronomer Jerry Amon circled it on the printout and scribbled, "Wow." In the margin, lasting 72 seconds, the transmission came from the direction of the Sagittarius constellation, blasting at a frequency of 1,420 MHz, a band reserved internationally for astronomical research, meaning no human-made satellite should have been broadcasting there. The signal's intensity spiked and faded exactly as expected for a distant extraterrestrial source passing through the telescope's field of view. But when scientists scrambled to listen again, the stars had gone silent. What made the WOW signal so tantalizing wasn't just its strength. It matched the predicted signature of an intelligent transmission almost perfectly. The frequency aligned with the hydrogen line, a universal waterhole scientists theorized aliens might use to communicate, since hydrogen is the most abundant element in space. The signal's narrow bandwidth suggested artificial modulation, unlike the broad emissions of quasars or pulsars. Even its structure seemed deliberate, with fluctuations that some analysts argue could encode mathematical patterns. Decades later, no natural explanation, no comet, no asteroid, no known cosmic phenomenon fully accounts for it, yet skeptics have their own compelling arguments. Some propose it was a reflected signal from a secret military satellite bouncing off space debris. Others point to a passing Soviet probe, though records show none were in that region at the time. The most intriguing counter-theory comes from astronomer Antonio Paris, who suggests a pair of comets, undetected in 1977, might have emitted hydrogen clouds mimicking an artificial signal. But when the comets returned in 2017, follow-up observations found no matching emissions. The mystery only deepens. The WOW signal's legacy lies in its unnerving implications. If it was extraterrestrial, why hasn't it repeated? Did we intercept a one-time beacon, a cosmic hello lost in the void? Or was it, as some SETI researchers fear, a message we were never meant to hear, a fragment of alien communication we lack the context to understand? The signal's brevity haunts scientists like a half-overheard conversation, leaving us forever wondering what might have been said next. Modern efforts continue the search. Breakthrough Listen, the largest SETI project in history, scans thousands of star systems with equipment far more sensitive than Big Ear. but the wow signal remains unique, a flicker in the dark that challenges our place in the universe. Whether it was a greeting, a glitch, or something beyond our comprehension, one thing's certain. For 72 seconds in 1977, the universe spoke. And we're still straining to hear its voice. The death of Marilyn Monroe on August 5, 1962, was ruled a suicide, an overdose of barbiturates, the tragic end of a troubled star. But behind the official narrative lies a maze of contradictions, redacted files, and whispers of murder. Start with the scene itself. Monroe was found nude, face down on her bed, one hand clutching the telephone. The first officer on the scene, Jack Clemens, later testified that something felt off immediately. There was no glass near her to wash down the dozens of pills allegedly ingested, no vomit typically present in overdoses, and her body showed signs of bruising inconsistent with suicide. Even more suspicious, her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, spent hours washing sheets and tidying the house before calling authorities, behavior that reeks of tampering, not grief. Then there's the vanishing evidence. Monroe's toxicology report, which should have detailed the exact levels of drugs in her system, disappeared from the coroner's office. The original autopsy notes were similarly lost, replaced by a sanitized version listing probable suicide. And the FBI's file on Monroe, only partially declassified decades later, reveals startling details. She'd been under surveillance for months due to her close ties to both President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert. Phone records prove she called the White House repeatedly in her final days, once even screaming at Bobby Kennedy during a heated argument. Witnesses placed him in Los Angeles the night she died, despite his official schedule claiming he was in San Francisco. The most tantalizing clue, Monroe's so-called Red Diary, described by Murray as a private journal where the actress recorded intimate conversations with the Kennedys, including political secrets and threats she allegedly overheard. The diary was never found, but former FBI agent Wesley Swearingen later claimed it was seized by the Bureau and destroyed. Even more damning are the testimonies of those who say Monroe was planning a press conference to expose her affairs with the brothers, a move that could have derailed JFK's presidency. Could the Kennedys have ordered her silenced, or was the mafia involved, using her death to blackmail the administration? Some researchers point to the suspicious overdose of Monroe's psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, just weeks after her death, a man who'd been experimenting with hypnotic drugs on the actress. Others highlight the role of Peter Lawford, JFK's brother-in-law, who allegedly coordinated the cover-up from his beach house. The truth may never be fully known, but one thing's clear: Marilyn Monroe didn't just die. She was buried twice, first in the ground, then under layers of lies. And the deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes. Some suicides are anything but. The rumor started as a whisper in late 1969, spreading like wildfire through college campuses and underground radio stations. Paul McCartney was dead, replaced by a doppelganger to spare the world from the shocking truth. The so-called "Paul is dead" conspiracy hinges on a series of eerie clues supposedly hidden in Beatles albums after 1966, the year some claim McCartney died in a car crash. Start with the iconic Abbey Road cover. At first glance, it's just four men crossing a street, but conspiracy sleuths see a funeral procession. John Lennon in white as the preacher, Ringo Starr in black as the mourner, George Harrison in denim as the gravedigger, and Paul, barefoot and out of step with the others, symbolizing a corpse. Even the license plate on the parked Volkswagen Beetle reads LMW28IF, interpreted as Linda McCartney weeps. Paul would have been 28 if he'd lived. Then there's the music itself. Play Revolution 9 from the White Album backward, and some hear a voice chanting, "Turn me on, dead man." The haunting refrain, "I buried Paul in strawberry fields forever," was later explained by Lennon as cranberry sauce, but too late to quell suspicions. Audio engineers have noted oddities in post-66 recordings, like McCartney's vocal pitch shifting subtly in SGT, Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, a detail hard to dismiss as mere production tweaks. One technician working on the 1996 anthology remasters claimed isolated tracks revealed double-tracked vocals where only one voice matched McCartney's known timbre. But the most chilling proof lies in Magical Mystery Tour. On the album sleeve, McCartney wears a black carnation while the others wear red, a Victorian symbol of death. The inner gatefold shows him holding a mysterious black card while the other Beatles hold red ones, and when you spin the record backward at the end of Glass Onion, a garbled voice seems to whisper, "Paul is dead now, miss him, miss him." Skeptics argue these are coincidences or artistic choices, but the sheer volume of anomalies begs the question, why would the Beatles or their label plant so many red herrings? Theories about the replacement vary. Some say a look-alike contest winner named William Campbell was drafted to assume McCartney's identity, pointing to subtle facial changes in later photos, his cheekbones sharper, his smile slightly asymmetrical. Others claim MI6 orchestrated the swap to avoid panic over losing a cultural icon. Even McCartney's own responses fuel speculation. In a 1969 interview, when asked directly if he was dead, he laughed and said, "Do I look dead?" But the camera abruptly cut away, leaving his tone ambiguous. Perhaps the most compelling counterargument comes from forensic voice analysis. In 2021, a team compared pre- and post-66 recordings using AI, concluding the vocal prints were statistically identical. Yet the mystery persists, kept alive by generations of fans dissecting every chord and pixel. Whether an elaborate hoax, a marketing stunt gone rogue, or the greatest cover-up in music history, the "Paul is dead" theory endures because it taps into something deeper. Our fear that even the brightest legends can vanish in an instant, leaving behind only cryptic breadcrumbs, and the unsettling sense that we might never know the real story. In the quiet countryside of Elbert County, Georgia, a set of granite slabs erected in 1980 stand like a cryptic monument to humanity's future or its demise. The Georgia Guidestones, often called America's Stonehenge, bore 10 commandments etched in multiple languages, urging population control, environmental balance, and global unity under a new age of reason. But it was the first directive that sent chills down spines: maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. To some, it read less like a suggestion and more like a blueprint for culling billions. The anonymous group behind the stones, operating under the pseudonym R.C. Christian, claimed to represent a small group of loyal Americans, yet their true identities and motives remain shrouded in mystery. Conspiracy theorists saw darker forces at work, whispers of Illuminati symbolism, ties to eugenics movements, and even predictions of a planned depopulation event. Then, in 2022, the stones were suddenly demolished after surviving decades of vandalism and protests, just as global tensions over pandemics and resource scarcity reached a boiling point. Was their destruction an act of defiance, or had their message served its purpose? Halfway across the country, another modern enigma hides in plain sight: Denver International Airport. Beneath its sprawling runways lies a labyrinth of murals so unsettling they've fueled speculation for decades. One painting depicts a menacing figure in a gas mask cradling a sword and a Mayan sacrificial knife, while another shows children in coffins under a banner reading "Genocide." Even the airport's official mascot, a demon-eyed blue Mustang titled Lucifer, greets visitors with an aura of unease. But the most persistent theory centers on what lies beneath the terminal: rumors of a vast underground city, reinforced by suspicious construction delays, unexplained tunnels, and a dedication plaque referencing a New World Airport Commission, an organization that doesn't exist. Some claim the site was built as a refuge for elites during a coming catastrophe, while others point to eerie parallels with Nazi architectural plans for a world capital discovered in Hitler's archives. The threads connecting these monuments are as deliberate as they are disturbing. Both emerged during periods of social upheaval. The guidestones amid the Cold War's peak, the airport as the New World Order conspiracy gained traction in the 90s. Both employ esoteric imagery that seems to telegraph hidden agendas, whether through the guidestones' precise astronomical alignments or Denver's apocalyptic art. And both have faced official efforts to suppress their narratives, whether by demolishing the stones or dismissing the airport's oddities as just art. But what if these sites aren't just eccentric installations? What if they're mile markers on a road to something far more calculated, a coordinated effort to condition the public for a future only a select few have planned? The stones may be gone, and the airport's murals may fade, but the questions they raise linger like a warning etched in stone or painted in shadows. On an unseasonably warm December morning in 1948, beachgoers in Adelaide, Australia stumbled upon a chilling sight. A well-dressed man lying motionless against the seawall, his head resting peacefully on his folded jacket as if asleep. But this was no sunbather. The unidentified man, later dubbed the Somerton Man for the beach where he was found, showed no signs of violence, no visible injuries, just a strange stillness that would become the foundation of one of history's most perplexing unsolved mysteries. The autopsy revealed baffling details. Though his organs showed signs of congestion consistent with poisoning, no traces of any known toxin could be detected. His spleen was alarmingly enlarged, 3 times its normal size, a condition sometimes seen in chronic infections or rare diseases. The contents of his pockets only deepened the enigma: a used bus ticket, chewing gum, matches, cigarettes, and a tiny scrap of paper torn from a book. On it, printed in elegant script, were the words Taman Shud, Persian for "it is ended" or "finished." But the real bombshell came when investigators traced the scrap to a rare copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a 12th century Persian poetry collection. The book, discovered tossed in the backseat of an unlocked car near the crime scene, held more than just poetry. Scrawled in the back were 5 lines of apparent code, a jumble of letters that resembled no known cipher. Beneath them, a phone number led to a local nurse who claimed she'd never seen the dead man before, though neighbors reported hearing her cry out upon viewing his plaster death mask. Theories about his identity spiral from the plausible to the extraordinary. Some point to Cold War espionage. 1948 was the dawn of atomic anxieties, and Adelaide housed sensitive military research facilities. The Taman Shud scrap might have been a spy's termination signal, and the unbreakable code a one-time pad message. Others note the man's abnormally large calf muscles and oddly tapered toes, traits common among ballet dancers, sparking speculation he was a Soviet defector or even a British MI6 agent. His dental work suggested European origins, yet no missing persons reports matched. Modern forensic breakthroughs have only added layers to the puzzle. In 2022, DNA analysis suggested the man might have had relatives in the American South, while isotope testing of his teeth hinted at childhood years spent in the northern United States or Canada. But the code remains uncracked, defying even wartime cryptographers and supercomputers. Was it a personal cipher, a random doodle, or the key to everything? The nurse at the center of the case took her secrets to the grave, but her own daughter would later claim her mother confessed on her deathbed she knew the Somerton Man. They'd met during the war, she said. His name, perhaps Albert, but like every lead in this case, it dissolves into hearsay, leaving only the silent corpse on the beach, the whispering Persian verse, and the unshakable feeling that someone, somewhere, knew exactly how this story ended and made sure we never would. For over 200 years, the soggy soil of Oak Island has lured treasure hunters into an obsession bordering on madness. Off the coast of Nova Scotia, this unassuming patch of land hides what many believe to be the ultimate pirate hoard, or something far more ancient and mysterious. It all started in 1795 when a teenager named Daniel Maginnis stumbled upon a peculiar depression in the ground, ringed by old oak trees with unnatural markings. Beneath layers of soil and logs, he and his friends uncovered a man-made shaft descending into darkness, the first clue in what would become history's most infamous treasure hunt. Almost immediately, the so-called money pit revealed its cruel nature. Every few feet would-be excavators hit layers of logs, coconut fibers, and even putty, barriers clearly designed to slow intruders. Then, at 90 feet, workers struck a flat stone inscribed with cryptic symbols. Later translated as 40 feet below, 2 million pounds lie buried. The message vanished without a trace, fueling suspicions of an elaborate cover-up. But the real terror came when the pit suddenly flooded with seawater, collapsing tunnels and nearly drowning the diggers. This wasn't just a hidden vault, it was a booby-trapped labyrinth, engineered to protect its secrets at all costs. Theories about what lies at the bottom range from plausible to fantastical. Some point to Captain Kidd's lost pirate treasure, citing 18th century tales of his crew burying loot along the North Atlantic coast. Others whisper of Marie Antoinette's missing jewels, smuggled out of France during the Revolution with the help of loyalists who might have used Oak Island as a temporary hiding place. But the most tantalizing hypothesis ties the pit to the Knights Templar. Medieval documents suggest the order fled to Nova Scotia after their persecution in the 14th century, possibly bringing sacred relics like the Ark of the Covenant or the Holy Grail. Intriguingly, carvings found in nearby caves resemble Templar symbols, while geological surveys show possible underground chambers aligned with celestial patterns significant to the order. Modern efforts to solve the mystery have only deepened the intrigue. In 1965, a camera lowered into a borehole captured eerie images of what appeared to be chests and even a severed hand, but subsequent excavations found nothing. Then, in 2014, dendrochronology dated wood fragments from the pit to the mid-1700s, confirming human activity long before Maginnis's discovery. Most recently, core samples revealed traces of gold and silver deep underground, yet the treasure itself remains stubbornly out of reach. Skeptics argue the money pit is nothing more than a natural sinkhole, its traps just collapsed seashore drainage. But how then to explain the coconut fibers, a material foreign to Nova Scotia, or the meticulously placed layers of logs and clay, and why, after centuries of digging, does the island still guard its secrets with such vicious determination? The truth may lie in the very design of the pit. Ancient accounts describe flood tunnels engineered to funnel seawater from a nearby bay the instant treasure hunters breach the final chamber. Some researchers believe the entire site is a decoy, meant to exhaust and bankrupt those who seek its riches, while the real treasure, if it exists, rests elsewhere on the island. Others think the pit was never about gold at all, but something far more dangerous, forbidden knowledge buried where no one could ever retrieve it. As drilling technology advances and new generations of explorers take up the hunt, Oak Island's grip on our imagination only tightens. Whether the pit holds pirate plunder, Templar relics, or merely the world's most elaborate practical joke, one thing's certain: its mysteries were built to last. And after 2 centuries of failure, the greatest treasure might just be the lesson etched into its flooded tunnels: some secrets aren't meant to be found. The CIA's MK-Ultra program wasn't some fringe theory scribbled in the margins of conspiracy lore. It was a horrifying reality confirmed by declassified documents and congressional hearings. Officially launched in 1953, this clandestine project sought to crack the code of human mind control, testing everything from LSD to hypnosis, sensory deprivation to electroshock therapy, often on unwitting subjects. The program's scope was staggering: over 150 sub-projects, many conducted through front organizations like universities and hospitals, with zero regard for ethics or consent. One of the most chilling experiments unfolded at McGill University in Montreal, where Dr. Ewan Cameron, funded by MKUltra, subjected patients to psychic driving, a brutal regimen of drug-induced comas, repeated tape-recorded messages, and electroconvulsive therapy so intense it erased entire chunks of their memories. Survivors later described waking up unable to recognize their families, their identities effectively rewritten. But the darkest chapter might be the CIA's collaboration with Harvard psychologists in the late 1950s, where young students, including a brilliant but troubled math prodigy named Ted Kaczynski, were subjected to intense psychological abuse under the guise of stress tests. Stripped of autonomy, verbally dismantled by interrogators, and dosed with LSD, these unwitting participants endured what one researcher called soul murder. Years later, Kaczynski would become the Unabomber, leading some to speculate whether his descent into violence was, at least in part, a product of MKUltra's twisted experiments. Then there's the shadowy connection to Charles Manson. Declassified files reveal that Manson's parole officer was a former Navy psychologist linked to MKUltra contractors, while Manson himself spent time at Terminal Island Prison, a facility rumored to host CIA behavioral studies. Could his sudden transformation from petty criminal to cult leader have been chemically or psychologically engineered? Former associates claimed Manson frequently spoke of being programmed during his incarceration, and his ability to manipulate followers bore eerie similarities to MKUltra's documented goals. The CIA's paper trail only adds to the unease. In 1973, then-Director Richard Helms ordered most MKUltra files destroyed, leaving only scattered fragments uncovered by journalists and investigators. What little survived paints a picture of unchecked ambition. Memos discussing terminal experiments on terminal cancer patients, contracts with brothels to drug Johns unknowingly, and even plans to weaponize charismatic cult leaders as geopolitical tools. What makes MKUltra uniquely terrifying isn't just its brutality, it's the lingering question of how much wasn't documented, how many victims never knew they were part of an experiment, and how many techniques developed in those dark rooms might still be in use today. The program officially ended in 1973, but as former CIA officer Sidney Gottlieb once admitted, once you open Pandora's box, it's hard to claim the demons ever go back inside. Some secrets, it seems, are too dangerous even for the shredder. The assassination of John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, was more than a national tragedy. It was a crack in the foundation of American trust. While Lee Harvey Oswald was swiftly labeled the lone gunman, the unsettling inconsistencies surrounding that day have fueled decades of speculation. Start with the so-called magic bullet, the pristine projectile allegedly responsible for wounding both Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally. The official Warren Commission report insists this single bullet traveled in an impossible zigzag, entering Kennedy's back, exiting his throat, then making a midair U-turn to strike Connally's ribs, wrist, and thigh. Forensic experts have repeatedly demonstrated that no bullet behaves this way, yet the theory remains enshrined in the official record. Then there's the eerie presence of CIA operatives in Dealey Plaza that afternoon. At least 3 agents with direct ties to anti-Castro operations were spotted in the crowd, including George de Mohrenschildt, Oswald's mysterious handler who later died by suicide hours before he was scheduled to testify. Even stranger, a CIA memo declassified in 2017 revealed the agency had been monitoring Oswald since 1959, calling into question their claims of no prior knowledge. Was he a patsy, as he insisted before his own murder, or something far more complicated, an asset whose role spiraled out of control? Lyndon B. Johnson's sudden ascension to power raises its own red flags. Witnesses reported LBJ behaving oddly both before and after the assassination, allegedly pressuring officials to rush the Warren Commission's findings. His longtime mistress, Madeleine Brown, later claimed he confessed involvement, whispering at a party, Those damned Kennedys. They've been a thorn in my side for years, but after today, they'll never embarrass me again." While historians dismiss her account, Johnson's political fortunes undeniably skyrocketed after Kennedy's death, with his vast Texas oil connections standing to gain from policies Kennedy opposed. But perhaps the most chilling pattern lies in the aftermath. Over 100 witnesses met untimely deaths within 3 years of the assassination. Dorothy Kilgallen, the journalist who secured an exclusive jailhouse interview with Jack Ruby, was found dead under suspicious circumstances before she could publish her findings. Mary Pinchot Mayer, JFK's rumored lover and a critic of the official narrative, was shot execution style on a D.C. canal path. Even FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover privately admitted the death toll was statistically improbable, calling it more than a coincidence in classified memos. Newer investigations only deepen the mystery. Acoustic analysis of a police dictable recording suggests a fourth shot originated from the grassy knoll, a finding the House Select Committee on Assassinations endorsed before backtracking under pressure. Meanwhile, Kennedy's brain, the critical piece of ballistic evidence, vanished from the National Archives, replaced with an unidentified specimen. Whether it was the CIA, the mob, or rogue elements within his own government, one thing is certain: the truth about Dallas died with far more than just a president. And every new revelation only proves how little we truly know. On July 20th, 1969, 600 million people around the world watched Neil Armstrong take that first iconic step onto the lunar surface. But within years, whispers began circulating. What if it was all an elaborate hoax? The Apollo moon landing conspiracy claims NASA staged the entire event, pointing to supposed anomalies in the footage as proof. Some of the most persistent arguments focus on the flag appearing to wave in a vacuum, the lack of visible stars in the sky, and the odd shadows crisscrossing the lunar surface. Each of these has a scientific explanation, but the myth endures, revealing more about our distrust of authority than any actual deception. Take the flag first. Skeptics argue it couldn't have moved without air, but the flag's apparent ripple was actually caused by inertia. Engineers designed it with a horizontal rod to keep it unfurled in the airless environment. When astronauts planted it, the force of their movements made the fabric swing briefly, just like a pendulum in slow motion. The lack of stars is another common sticking point. If space is filled with stars, why don't they appear in Apollo photos? The answer lies in camera settings. The lunar surface was so brightly lit by the sun that astronauts had to use fast shutter speeds, which overexposed faint starlight. Stars only show up in long exposure shots, something NASA wouldn't fake incorrectly anyway. Then there's the shadow controversy. Some images show shadows falling at different angles, supposedly revealing multiple studio light sources. But this is a misinterpretation of how light behaves on the moon. With no atmosphere to scatter sunlight, shadows appear harsher and more jagged than on Earth. The uneven terrain also distorts perspective, making parallel shadows seem misaligned. Even more convincingly, independent researchers have used lasers to bounce signals off retroreflectors left on the moon by Apollo crews hardware that couldn't have been placed without human presence. So why does the hoax theory persist despite overwhelming evidence? Part of it stems from the political climate of the late 60s. The space race was a high-stakes propaganda battle, and distrust of government was at an all-time high due to Vietnam and Watergate. Conspiracy theorists like Bill Kaysing, a former technical writer with no direct involvement in Apollo, stoked suspicions with sensational claims about staged sets and murdered astronauts. Cultural factors play a role too. Human brains are wired to spot patterns, even where none exist. The unfamiliarity of lunar conditions makes photos look off to untrained eyes, reinforcing skepticism. Perhaps the most overlooked detail is sheer scale. Over 400,000 people worked on Apollo across contractors and agencies. Keeping a secret this vast for over 50 years would be statistically impossible. yet not a single insider has provided irrefutable proof of fraud. Meanwhile, lunar samples brought back matched geological data from later unmanned missions, and high-resolution images from NAS, a lunar reconnaissance orbiter, show landing sites with trails left by astronauts. The moon landing hoax myth thrives because it taps into a universal human instinct questioning grand narratives. But when examined closely, the so-called anomalies dissolve under scrutiny, leaving one undeniable truth: 12 humans really did walk on the moon. The real conspiracy isn't about fakery, it's why we're so eager to believe the impossible instead of celebrating one of humanity's greatest achievements. Behind the towering walls of Vatican City lies one of the most impenetrable troves of knowledge in human history, the Vatican Secret Archives, officially renamed the Vatican Apostolic Archive in 2019. This labyrinthine repository holds 85 kilometers of shelving packed with manuscripts, letters, and texts dating back over 12 centuries. Yet less than 1% of its contents have ever been seen by outsiders. The archives operate under strict rules. Scholars must request specific documents months in advance, and even then, access is granted only to pre-approved materials. What could be so sensitive that even in the digital age, centuries-old parchments remain locked away? Some of the most explosive theories center around suppressed biblical texts, like the Gnostic Gospels excluded from the New Testament for challenging church doctrine. These writings describe alternative Christian traditions, including female apostles and Christ's alleged marriage to Mary Magdalene, ideas that could destabilize centuries of theological authority. Other documents rumored to be hidden include the complete trial records of the Knights Templar, financial ledgers detailing the Church's historical ties to European monarchies, and even correspondence with extraterrestrial beings. A claim bolstered by former Vatican astronomer Guy Consolmagno's statement that he would baptize an alien if it asked. But the archive's secrecy pales next to the enigma of the third secret of Fatima. In 1917, 3 Portuguese shepherd children reported visions of the Virgin Mary, who entrusted them with 3 prophecies. The first 2 predicting World War II and the rise of Soviet communism were revealed in 1941. The third, described by the sole surviving witness as so terrifying it would make the oceans freeze, was locked in a vault until 2000. Even its eventual release sparked controversy. The published text described a bishop in white falling under gunfire, interpreted by many as the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. But skeptics note eerie discrepancies. Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, privately admitted the full secret contained apocalyptic elements too alarming for public consumption. Leaked accounts from Vatican insiders describe pages still with held texts allegedly warning of a coming schism in the Church, a false prophet usurping the papacy, and even a global catastrophe tied to celestial events. The connection between these 2 mysteries runs deeper than mere intrigue. In 1966, researcher Fr. Malachi Martin, a former Vatican exorcist and professor, claimed to have seen both the Third Secret's complete text and suppressed archive documents confirming a centuries-old cover-up. His controversial book, The Jesuits, alleged that certain factions within the Church had been preparing for an imminent prophesied crisis, one tied to the very secrets now buried in those vaults. Whether these claims hold truth or are merely the fabrications of a disillusioned priest remains unknown. What is certain is that in a world where information flows freely, the Vatican's guarded archives and the shadowy corners of Marian prophecy stand as rare exceptions, fortresses of silence in an age of noise. And behind their locked doors, history's most explosive revelations may still be waiting. Just after midnight on December 26, 1980, something extraordinary unfolded in Rendlesham Forest, an incident so bizarre, so meticulously documented by military personnel, that it's often called Britain's Roswell. What began as a routine patrol near the twin NATO bases of Bentwaters and Woodbridge quickly spiraled into one of the most credible UFO encounters in history. Airman John Burroughs and his team were the first to report strange lights descending into the trees, describing them as a glowing object, metallic in appearance with pulsating colored lights. But this wasn't just a fleeting glimpse. Over 3 consecutive nights, multiple witnesses, including high-ranking officers, claimed to have seen and even touched an otherworldly craft. The most compelling evidence comes from Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, the deputy base commander. His official memo to the UK Ministry of Defence, later leaked to the public, reads like a scene from a sci-fi thriller. Halt describes beams of light exploding into the forest, a triangular craft hovering silently before vanishing at impossible speed, and, most chillingly, radiation readings spiking at the alleged landing site. Geiger counters reportedly measured 7 times the normal background levels, with distinct indentations left in the ground where the object had rested. Halt even recorded an audio tape during the encounter, his voice trembling as he narrates the surreal events in real time. "It's coming this way. There's no doubt about it. This is not a fake." Then there's the testimony of Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston, who claimed to have gotten close enough to touch the craft. His sketches reveal an intricate, hieroglyphic-like pattern etched into its surface symbols he later attempted to decode using binary logic. Decades after the event, Peniston still stands by his account, insisting the craft projected a telepathic download of images into his mind, including visions of future catastrophes. Skeptics dismiss this as post-traumatic confabulation, but radar operators at nearby RAF Watton confirmed detecting unexplained objects that night, and declassified documents reveal an unusual level of interest from both the UK and US governments in the aftermath. Theories about what really happened range from the plausible to the extraordinary. Some suggest a classified military experiment gone awry, pointing to the nearby Porton-Down chemical weapons facility. Others believe it was a misidentified lighthouse beam, though witnesses, many of them trained observers, swore the lights moved with precision no terrestrial source could match. Then there's the most tantalizing possibility that something not of this world briefly landed in that quiet English forest, leaving behind traces we still don't fully understand. What makes Rendlesham unique isn't just the credibility of its witnesses or the physical evidence, it's the sheer weight of official documentation. Unlike so many UFO cases buried in hearsay, this one features signed memos, radiation reports, and even a reluctant admission from the UK government that something unexplained occurred. Yet despite all this, the incident remains shrouded in ambiguity, a puzzle wrapped in Cold War secrecy. Whether it was a secret aircraft, a psychological operation, or something beyond our comprehension, Rendlesham Forest stands as a reminder that sometimes the most incredible truths hide in plain sight, waiting just beyond the tree line. Deep in the redwood forests of Northern California, hidden behind 700 acres of private land, lies one of the most exclusive and controversial gatherings in the world, the Bohemian Grove. Since 1872, this all-male retreat has hosted presidents, CEOs, artists, and power brokers for 2 weeks each summer, blending networking with bizarre rituals straight out of an occult playbook. At the heart of the speculation is the cremation of care, a theatrical ceremony where robed figures burn an effigy named Dull Care before a 40-foot stone owl chanting in flickering torchlight. To outsiders, it looks like something between a college fraternity initiation and a pagan rite, but when the participants include men like Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and corporate titans from Wall Street, the spectacle takes on a far more sinister tone. Leaked footage from the early 2000s offers the rarest glimpse inside this secretive event. The images are grainy but unmistakable. High-ranking officials in dark robes, their faces obscured, reciting incantations around a blazing pyre as the owl, an ancient symbol of wisdom but also secrecy, looms overhead. Participants insist it's merely whimsical theater, a way to burn away worldly concerns before the retreat's serious discussions begin. Yet the symbolism is hard to ignore. The owl itself has ties to Moloch, a Canaanite deity associated with child sacrifice, a connection conspiracy theorists seize upon, especially given the Grove's infamous lakeside talks, where political and business deals are allegedly struck away from public scrutiny. Then there's the guest list. Confidential rosters leaked over the years reveal an astonishing who's who of American power: former CIA directors, oil magnates, media moguls, and even sitting Supreme Court justices. Their presence raises uncomfortable questions. Is this just an eccentric bonding ritual among elites, or does the ceremony serve a darker purpose, reinforcing loyalty to a hidden agenda? The Grove's defenders point to its philanthropic work and claim the event fosters bipartisan cooperation, but critics note the glaring lack of transparency. No journalists are permitted on site, and attendees famously take an oath of secrecy. When Alex Jones infiltrated the grounds in 2000, capturing footage of the ritual before being chased out by security, his documentary Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove only amplified suspicions. Perhaps the most chilling aspect is how casually insiders discuss it. In newly unearthed audio, Nixon can be heard joking about the ceremony with Reagan, calling it the weirdest damn thing, but admitting it bonds you like nothing else. Meanwhile, corporate leaders like the late David Packard of Hewlett-Packard openly referenced the Grove's influence on policy decisions. The disconnect between their nonchalance and the public's unease speaks volumes. If this were truly harmless eccentricity, why the obsessive secrecy? Why the coded language in member correspondence? The Bohemian Grove's true power may lie not in any literal occult pact, but in the psychology of exclusivity. Rituals, no matter how bizarre, create shared experience, a sense of belonging to something larger than oneself. And when that something includes the world's most powerful men, the implications are undeniable. Whether it's an innocent tradition or a shadowy cabal's meeting ground, the Grove remains a litmus test for how much we're willing to ignore in the name of access. And as long as the redwoods stand, the owl will keep watching, silent, unblinking, and utterly inscrutable. The days leading up to September 11, 2001, saw a series of financial anomalies so glaring they've fueled suspicions for decades, unprecedented bets against airline and insurance stocks, as if someone knew catastrophe was coming. Just weeks before the attacks, put options, a type of trade that profits when a stock's value crashes, spiked dramatically on companies like United Airlines and American Airlines. These weren't small wagers. Records show purchases dwarfing typical volumes, with United's put options soaring nearly 60 times their usual activity. Even more telling, nearly all these trades were placed through Deutsche Bank and Alex Brown, firms later linked to intelligence networks. The timing was uncanny. The surge began on September 6th, peaked on the 7th, and abruptly stopped on the 10th, one day before the towers fell. When the Securities and Exchange Commission launched its investigation, the findings were anything but reassuring. They identified 38 entities behind the suspicious trades, but concluded no insider trading charges could be filed due to lack of evidence. Yet buried in their 800-page report was a startling admission. They couldn't account for the origin of $2.5 million in option profits. The money simply vanished along with key witnesses. One broker involved, Kyle Thusgard, died in a suspicious motorcycle accident weeks after being questioned. Another, Wolfgang Flirtel, vanished entirely after telling colleagues he was being watched. Then there's the curious case of Donald Rumsfeld. On the morning of September 11th, the Secretary of Defense was scheduled for a routine press briefing at the Pentagon. But shortly before the first plane hit, he abruptly cancelled and headed to a private meeting on the opposite side of the building, a move that inadvertently spared him from the exact sector where Flight 77 later struck. That same morning, an unknown party placed massive put options on Raytheon. the defense contractor that would soon surge in value due to post-9/11 military contracts. Rumsfeld, coincidentally, had served on Raytheon's board until January 2001. The most chilling detail: the CIA had been monitoring these trades in real time. Documents declassified in 2017 reveal the agency filed an urgent memo on September 8 warning of anomalous financial activity connected to Al-Qaeda. Yet when Congress pressed for answers, then CIA Director George Tenet claimed the memo was lost in the bureaucracy. Wall Street's watchdog, the SEC, later admitted destroying 18 boxes of files related to its 9/11 investigation files that might have revealed whether this was mere coincidence or something far darker. Skeptics argue the surge in put options could have been a fluke, investors reacting to a struggling airline industry, perhaps, but consider this: the trades weren't spread across competitors. They zeroed in on the two airlines whose planes would be hijacked while ignoring rivals like Delta and Southwest. The odds of that happening by chance? Mathematicians estimate less than 1 in a billion. Whether the trades were a lucky guess or proof of foreknowledge remains officially unresolved. But one thing's certain: the financial fingerprints of 9/11 point to a story far more intricate than we've been told. And somewhere in the gaps between those missing files and silenced witnesses lies a truth the world may never fully uncover. When the first cases of a mysterious pneumonia-like illness emerged in Wuhan, China in late 2019, few could have predicted the firestorm of controversy that would erupt over its origins. The COVID-19 pandemic quickly became not just a global health crisis, but a battleground for competing narratives, geopolitical tensions, and one of the most heated scientific debates of our time. At the center of it all stood a theory so politically charged that even discussing it risked professional ostracism: the possibility that the virus might have escaped from a research lab rather than jumping naturally from animals to humans. The Wuhan Institute of Virology wasn't just any laboratory, a global hub for coronavirus research. It housed one of the largest collections of bat viruses in the world, including strains genetically similar to SARS-CoV-2. As early as 2017, U.S. embassy officials visiting the lab raised alarms about inadequate safety protocols, noting in diplomatic cables the risk of a potential new SARS-like pandemic stemming from lax procedures. These concerns gained new urgency when it was revealed that researchers there had been conducting gain-of-function experiments, controversial studies that enhance pathogen transmissibility or lethality to better understand pandemic threats. While supporters argue such research is vital for preparedness, critics warn the risks may outweigh the benefits, especially in facilities with questionable containment standards. For months, the lab leak hypothesis was dismissed as a conspiracy theory, suppressed by social media platforms and denounced by prominent scientists, but behind closed doors, doubts were growing. In early 2020, classified intelligence reports hinted at sick lab workers displaying COVID-like symptoms as early as November 2019. French virologist Luc Montagnier, a Nobel laureate for his HIV research, publicly challenged the natural origin narrative, pointing to unusual genetic sequences in the virus that suggested laboratory manipulation. The scientific establishment pushed back hard, but the cracks in the consensus were widening. Then came the bombshell. In May 2021, previously unseen State Department documents revealed that 3 researchers from the Wuhan lab had fallen ill in autumn 2019 with symptoms matching COVID-19, a detail China had concealed. Around the same time, the prestigious journal Science published a letter from 18 scientists calling for renewed investigation into both natural and laboratory scenarios, arguing that evidence for either origin remained inconclusive. Suddenly, the lab leak theory wasn't fringe speculation. It was a legitimate scientific question deserving rigorous scrutiny. Yet the zoonotic transmission theory, the idea that the virus jumped from animals to humans at Wuhan's Huanan seafood market, still held compelling evidence. Early cases clustered around the market, and environmental samples there tested positive for SARS-CoV-2. Researchers identified closely related coronaviruses in bats from southern China and pangolins smuggled through Southeast Asia, showing such cross-species jumps do occur naturally. The market's role as a hub for exotic wildlife trade made it a perfect spillover point. Then in 2022, two studies in Science traced the pandemic's origins specifically to the market, identifying stalls selling live raccoon dogs as ground zero. But the plot thickened further. The same studies confirmed the market wasn't the sole origin point. Early cases appeared elsewhere in Wuhan too. Meanwhile, leaked Chinese databases showed researchers at the Wuhan lab had collected viruses from mine shafts where workers previously suffered mysterious SARS-like illnesses. The lab had also collaborated with military scientists on coronavirus research, fueling suspicions of dual-use applications. China's aggressive obstruction of investigations, shuttering the market overnight, denying access to lab records, and pressuring the WHO only deepened suspicions. What began as a scientific debate became entangled in geopolitics. For China, admitting any lab connection risked global condemnation and reparations claims. For the US, championing the theory served to deflect criticism of its own pandemic failures while countering Chinese influence. This politicization made objective analysis nearly impossible. Scientists voicing openness to the lab hypothesis faced accusations of xenophobia, while those dismissing it outright were accused of ignoring red flags. The truth may lie somewhere between the extremes. The virus could have been collected naturally from the field, then accidentally released during research, a scenario neither purely zoonotic nor deliberate. Whatever the origin, the controversy exposed deeper issues: the lack of transparency in high-risk research, the suppression of scientific inquiry for political ends, and our collective vulnerability when science becomes a proxy for power struggles. As genetic databases disappear and key witnesses vanish, one thing grows clearer. The full story of COVID-19's origins may be more complex and more troubling than we've been willing to admit. Among the most troubling aspects of the COVID-19 origin debate isn't just the competing theories, it's the trail of vanished evidence and shifting narratives that raise red flags about transparency. One of the earliest warning signs came in September 2019, when a critical database containing viral sequences from bat coronaviruses collected at the Wuhan Institute of Virology suddenly went offline. The database, hosted by the U.S. National Institutes of Health, held over 22,000 genetic samples, including strains with 96% similarity to SARS-CoV-2. Researchers attempting to access it were met with error messages, and the NIH later confirmed the removal was requested by the Chinese scientists who submitted the data. Virologist Jesse Bloom of the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center managed to recover partial sequences through digital archives, publishing findings that suggested early COVID cases may have been circulating weeks before official reports. But why delete data during a burgeoning pandemic? Chinese officials claimed it was routine curation, but skeptics saw a deliberate erasure of potential smoking guns. Equally suspect were the conflicting statements from global health authorities. The World Health Organization initially praised China's transparency in January 2020, only to backtrack months later when Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus admitted investigators were denied raw patient data from early cases. Worse, a joint WHO-China report in 2021 listed the lab leak theory as extremely unlikely, a conclusion later contradicted by WHO-own experts who called the assessment premature. Emails obtained by journalists revealed internal disputes, with scientists like Marion Koopmans cautioning against dismissing the lab hypothesis without evidence. The dissonance reached a breaking point when WHO lead investigator Peter Ben Imberg conceded in a Danish documentary that lab accidents do happen, and that workers infected during fieldwork could have sparked the outbreak. These reversals painted a picture of an institution caught between scientific rigor and political pressure. Then there's the murky world of gain-of-function research funding. Documents obtained through FOIA requests show the U.S. National Institutes of Health funneled $600,000 annually to the Wuhan lab via EcoHealth Alliance, a non-profit studying bat coronaviruses. While NIH Director Francis Collins initially denied funding risky research, emails later proved his staff debated whether the experiments, which involved engineering chimeric viruses, violated federal moratoriums on enhancing pathogens. Dr. Anthony Force testified to Congress that the work didn't qualify as gain of function, but virologists like Richard Ebright of Rutgers University countered that inserting furin cleavage sites into coronaviruses, a hallmark of SARS-CoV-2, fit the definition precisely. The funding was abruptly cut in April 2020, yet EcoHealth's president Peter Daszak remained a vocal advocate for the natural origin theory, even organizing a Lancet letter condemning conspiracy theories as harmful, a move critics called a conflict of interest. The debate divides virologists into impassioned camps. Dr. Robert Gary of Chilean University argues the virus's genomic structure lacks telltale signs of lab manipulation, pointing to its mosaic genome, a patchwork of natural recombination. Yet Dr. Elena Chan of Harvard's Broad Institute notes the furin cleavage site, rare in related coronaviruses, appears suspiciously optimized for human cells. Meanwhile, former CDC Director Robert Redfield told CNN he believes the lab leak is the most plausible scenario, citing the virus's rapid adaptation to humans, unusual for a natural spillover. The scientific discord underscores a deeper issue. When politics and funding intersect with virology, objectivity becomes collateral damage. What's undeniable is the pattern of obstruction. From deleted databases to gagged researchers like Wuhan lab virologist Xi Jinping, who vanished from public view for months, the pandemic's origin story remains riddled with holes. Whether these gaps stem from bureaucratic bungling or deliberate suppression may never be fully known. But as long as key evidence stays buried, the world is left with a chilling lesson. In the age of pandemics, secrecy can be as deadly as any virus. History has a way of repeating its most unsettling patterns, especially when it comes to the fingerprints left behind by conspiracies, one of the most persistent red flags. The sudden disappearance of documents that could hold the truth. Take the CIA's deliberate destruction of MK-Ultra files in 1973, leaving only fragments to piece together the program's horrors. Or the vanishing of Abraham Lincoln's toxicology report and autopsy notes critical evidence that could have clarified the circumstances of his death. Even in modern cases like the Dyatlov Pass incident, key witness statements and forensic details were lost by Soviet authorities, replaced with vague, sanitized versions. This isn't just bureaucratic negligence, it's a recurring tactic, a way to sever the trail before it leads somewhere inconvenient. Then there's the eerie frequency of coincidental deaths surrounding high-stakes mysteries. The assassination of John F. Kennedy alone saw over 100 witnesses die under unusual circumstances within 3 years, from journalists like Dorothy Kilgallen to Mary Pinchot Mayer, whose execution-style murder was brushed aside as a random crime. In the wake of Marilyn Monroe's death, her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, overdosed mysteriously weeks later, cutting short any chance of deeper inquiry. These aren't isolated incidents, they're part of a pattern where those who get too close to sensitive truths often meet abrupt, unexplained ends. Even when foul play isn't proven, the statistical improbability of so many key figures dying in quick succession strains belief. Institutional resistance to investigations is another telltale sign. Time and again, whistleblowers and researchers run into walls, whether it's the FBI refusing to release unredacted files on the Franklin expedition's cannibalism claims, or the Vatican's ironclad control over its archives, where centuries-old manuscripts remain locked away despite modern demands for transparency. Consider the way the UK government dismissed the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident, despite sworn testimony from military personnel and physical evidence like radiation spikes. When organizations that should champion accountability instead obfuscate, delay, or outright deny access, it fuels suspicions that the official story is a carefully constructed facade. But why do some people instinctively embrace conspiracy theories while others dismiss them outright? Psychology offers compelling explanations. On one side, skepticism often stems from a healthy respect for Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation is usually correct. The human mind craves coherence, and wild theories can feel like unnecessary complexity. Yet belief in conspiracies often arises from the same cognitive impulse, the need to make sense of chaos. When events defy easy explanation, like the sudden disappearance of Flight 19 or the cryptic wounds of the Dyatlov hikers, the brain searches for patterns even where none may exist. This isn't irrationality, it's a survival mechanism. In uncertain times, believing in hidden actors can feel more comforting than accepting randomness. Cultural context plays a role too. Societies with deep distrust of authority, whether due to corruption scandals or historical betrayals, are more likely to question official narratives. The Cold War era birthed countless UFO and mind control theories because governments really were keeping staggering secrets, from MK Ultra to covert coups. Today, the same dynamic plays out with pandemic origins or financial anomalies. Once trust erodes, every inconsistency becomes potential proof of a larger plot. Yet the most fascinating aspect of conspiracy patterns isn't just their persistence, it's how they evolve. Medieval peasants blamed unseen cabals for plagues. Today, we dissect shadowy elites in boardrooms. The methods change, but the underlying tension remains, the struggle to discern truth in a world where power rarely operates in full view. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, history teaches one undeniable lesson: some secrets aren't just hidden. They're designed to stay that way. The relentless march of technology is rewriting history before our eyes, peeling back layers of deception, one pixel, one DNA strand, one declassified memo at a time. Satellite imaging now allows archaeologists to spot buried ruins invisible from the ground, like the recently discovered network of Mayan cities hidden beneath Guatemalan jungles for centuries. But these same tools have also deepened existing enigmas. When researchers used LiDAR scans to map Cambodia's Angkor Wat, they uncovered an even older metropolis beneath it, complete with unexplained geometric patterns that defy known Khmer engineering. For every mystery solved, another emerges from the shadows. DNA analysis has become the silent witness against historical cover-ups. The 1991 identification of the Romanov remains through mitochondrial DNA matched against living relatives should have been the final word on Russia's most infamous execution. Yet when two skeletons were missing from the mass grave, those of Tsarevich Alexei and Grand Duchess Maria, it sparked fresh conspiracy theories. Only in 2007 were the final remains discovered nearby, their bones showing evidence of acid burns and hurried burial. The genetic confirmation closed one chapter while opening another. Why did the Bolsheviks go to such lengths to hide these particular bodies? Modern forensics can identify the dead, but the motives of the killers often remain encrypted in time. Freedom of Information Act requests have torn gaps in government secrecy, revealing documents that reframe pivotal events. The 2013 release of CIA files confirmed the agency's surveillance of journalists during the Watergate scandal, while NSA papers exposed Cold War programs like Operation Shamrock, which intercepted every overseas telegram entering the U.S. But these disclosures breed their own paradoxes. When the FBI declassified its 800-page Marilyn Monroe file, heavily redacted pages hinted at her communications with Bobby Kennedy, yet the very act of censorship amplified suspicions of what might still be hidden. Transparency tools often reveal as much about contemporary power structures as they do about historical truths. Nowhere is this duality clearer than in the Oak Island mystery. Recent core samples drilled with 21st-century technology detected traces of gold and silver deep within the money pit, vindicating centuries of treasure hunters. But ground-penetrating radar also identified unnatural, grid-like tunnels beneath the island, structures far more complex than any pirate would need. Are these the remnants of a Templar treasure vault, or evidence of some other, older purpose we've yet to comprehend? The deeper we dig with modern tools, the stranger the past becomes. Even as science dispels old myths, it creates new folklore. The 2021 facial reconstruction of Egypt's King Tutankhamun, based on CT scans of his mummy, showed a frail young man with a cleft palate, not the golden god of legend. Yet this very human portrayal sparked wild speculation about hidden genetic disorders in the royal bloodline. Likewise, when researchers used isotope analysis on the Viking warrior skeleton at Birka, the DNA revealed something shocking. The remains were biologically female, upending centuries of assumptions about gender roles in Norse society. The past keeps surprising us, not because it changes, but because our tools for seeing it grow sharper. The irony is palpable. The same satellites that helped locate lost Viking settlements in Newfoundland also documented the Erie Straight Line, geoglyphs, in Kazakhstan, massive earthworks visible only from space, their purpose unknown. The genetic sequencing that identified Richard Roman III scoliosis, ravaged skeleton in a Leicester parking lot, simultaneously deepened the mystery of the princes in the tower, as DNA from living relatives suggests the royal bloodline may have been secretly continued. Every answer begets a dozen new questions, and history remains not a fixed story, but a living puzzle, one we're only beginning to decode. History's greatest conspiracies do more than just entertain. They hold up a mirror to society, reflecting our deepest anxieties and the hidden scaffolding of power. Think about it, the enduring fascination with who really killed JFK isn't just about a president's murder. It's about our fear that history isn't written by the people, but by puppeteers operating behind the curtain. The persistent whispers about the moon landing being faked, they speak to a primal distrust of institutions, especially when they claim achievements too extraordinary to easily comprehend. These stories endure because they're not just about facts, they're about the psychological and political undercurrents that shape our world. What makes these theories so compelling is how often they expose real cracks in official narratives. Take the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, once dismissed as wild speculation until declassified documents proved the U.S. government really did withhold treatment from black patients for decades. Or the CIA's MKUltra program, which sounded like paranoid fantasy until survivors and leaked papers confirmed its horrifying reality. The lesson here isn't that every conspiracy is true, it's that dismissing anomalies outright can mean missing genuine malfeasance. Power thrives in darkness, and sometimes the most outlandish-sounding claims turn out to be the ones most worth scrutinizing. But balance is key. For every legitimate cover-up, there are a dozen baseless claims muddying the waters. The trick is to approach history like a detective weighing evidence, considering motives, and resisting the urge to force pieces where they don't fit. When faced with a mystery like the Dyatlov Pass incident or the Voynich Manuscript, ask the right questions. Who benefits from the official story? What evidence contradicts it? And crucially, does this theory require a leap of logic so vast it defies Occam's razor? The best critical thinkers live in the gray area between skepticism and curiosity, where questions are tools, not weapons. That's where you come in. History isn't a static monologue, it's a debate, one that needs voices willing to dig deeper without tipping into dogma. Maybe you're convinced the Philadelphia experiment was a classified military disaster, or you think the lab leak theory explains COVID origins better than zoonotic spillover. Whatever your take, the comments are your court of inquiry. Share which theories you find most plausible, but more importantly, why. What evidence tipped the scales for you? And what unanswered questions still itch at your curiosity? Because the real conspiracy might just be this: the truth is rarely handed to us. It's pieced together, one clue at a time, by those brave enough to keep asking.